The Milwaukee Bucks complete another comeback, this time against the Miami Heat. What are we learning about these new look Bucks so far out of the All-Star break? We'll break down what powered the Bucks past the Heat plus more on the other side of the intro.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What it do? Welcome to Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, an NBA analyst with the Locked On Network and co-host of the Technical Foul Podcast. Joining me is Frank Madden, longtime voice of the pod and the founder of BrewHoop.com. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube and in newsletter form. If you have not yet already, head over to lockedondaily.com and sign up for the free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, Frank, the Bucks defeat the Heat 120-113. They overcame Tyler Hero going off for a 40 ball against them. And the Bucks have now won 3 straight games out of the All-Star break. And if you go back to before the break, they won that last one before they broke. So it's a 4-game win streak for this Bucks team that now sits at 32-24 on the season. And there's been a common theme for this Bucks team out of the All-Star break, and that's comebacks. They were down by 13 to the Clippers at one point. They won by 6. They were down by 16 against the Wizards early on. They won that one by 3. And then tonight, they were down by as many as 14 points against the Heat, came back to win by 7. In this game against the Heat, Frank, what did you see the Bucks clean up along the way to be able to pull out the victory down the stretch in this one?
I mean, I think, looking at the box score, right? I think the trend certainly for Miami, 37 points in the first quarter, and then I think they went 28-28 and 20 points in the remaining quarters. And, I think obviously you look at the defensive effort, I think improved sort of markedly as the game went on. They had a benefit of a 3-point advantage in this game. I think they were 36%. The Heat were 29%, I think, from 3.
Yep.
So kind of like some we always sort of like to talk a little bit about, when you have a 3-point advantage, which for this Bucks team is generally pretty important. They're the second best 3-point shooting team in the league. We always talk about how they, seem to, because even though they're a pretty good defensive rebounding team themselves, they don't get second chances. So it is really important that they score efficiently with those first shots, because that's generally all they're going to get. And so tonight, I always look at that total shot number to see like, hey, how much are the Bucks having to kind of fight the math game tonight? I think the Heat had like 2 more shots from the field, and they did take a few more free throws, but it wasn't like super pronounced. And so, obviously the better efficiency the Bucks had was able to kind of carry them through that. But I think there was kind of over the course of the game, like Kyle Kuzma, who I thought has been really good defensively since coming. I thought he gave us up some straight line drives to like Andrew Wiggins, which, you look at Wiggins' box score, he was only 7 out of 20, but I think in the second quarter, maybe, or in those middle quarters, he had a bit of a run. He had that 4-point play at the end of the first quarter. And it just felt like at times, like it felt like the Bucks could have been better at times, sort of containing them off the dribble. But I thought that improved as the game went on. And you look at the fourth quarter, I mean, Tyler Hero had a huge night, but I thought the Bucks made him have to take a lot of tough shots. We saw, whether it was KPJ, Gary Trent, other guys, like actually kind of standing him up and forcing him to take pretty tough shots down the stretch. And, again, 40 points from Hero. So, I mean, he kind of did about as much as you could have probably expected for him to do. But, I thought the Bucks balance obviously just kind of won out. And, Giannis fast start, and then kind of went dark for basically like most of the middle 2 quarters, but he was part of, he kind of broke free a bit late in the third quarter. I think really started with that alley-oop that Dame gave him on the fast break, which was a little bit of a risky play. Like, it's sort of one of those things like easier for Dame to just get the layup. But I think this is kind of one of those recognition things. Like, I think Dame realized like, hey, Giannis needs something to kind of get him out of, a mini slump here. He's been quiet. and obviously got the crowd going. And probably
Mhm.
another alley-oop I would highlight, the other big alley-oop in this game was in the early fourth when KPJ, yet again, I think this is 4 straight games now, he's gone double digits and has scored
Mhm.
efficiently. He was huge to start that fourth quarter and really kind of got the Bucks playing from the front. And when he threw that alley-oop to Jericho Sims, who mercifully scored his first basket in, I think, 45 minutes or something like that as a Buck. He's only taken 2 shots, mind you. But that was, I think, a big exclamation point as well. So, I think, especially with that starting five, I think there's been especially with lack, I think they need a movement shooter. We've talked about this. I'm sure we'll talk
Mhm.
more about it. It feels like they've been a bit stagnant, although they were winning when the starting five kind of first kind of got broken up to start this game. But yeah, it just kind of still feels like they're figuring out, that new grouping and kind of
Mhm.
how these new guys are going to fit in. But for the most part, I think the effort is there. And I think Brooke Lopez has continued to score efficiently, which we talked about kind of the need for him to be more consistent as well. So good to see Giannis's minutes ticking upward as well, because they're going to obviously need him to be more than a 24-minute per game guy.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, important win, right? Just to kind of keep the streak going here, keep pace with Indiana. And I mean, the Heat, yeah, they're under 500 right now, but you can't look past the Heat, right? We
Never.
Bucks fans, we know you can't do that. So an important win. Again, I feel like I've said that a lot, Camille. Like I feel like with their wins, they have a lot of important wins, like wins that they
Yeah.
kind of like needed more so than like necessarily impressive wins. But I think the resiliency of this roster, the fact that even with this kind of new grouping, like they don't seem to get too worried when they're down,
Mhm.
and they've shown the ability to kind of fight back from double-digit deficits, seemingly like every time they've had these games of late, really, except for the Minnesota game. It seems like they're always down double digits, whether it's the Wizards, the Heat, or the Clippers, and but they just kind of chip away, and again, would like the defense to be a bit more solid from the
Yeah.
start. Play 48 minutes of defense, but so far they're kind of doing enough. And again, like there's still a fair bit of season left here. So you just kind of hope that they can continue to stay healthy and get a little bit more fluidity, continuity, and get to kind of work out the kinks with some new pieces.
Yeah, and it's been impressive to see how they've been trying to work through this in real time because as you mentioned, what this team has shown me early on is just that this new look Bucks team, I'll say, they don't really have any quit in them. Like they can be down double digits and they just keep at it. They continue to keep at it. The defense continued to improve as the game went on. And this was another game where you had what, six different Bucks players with double digit scoring. You had Giannis with 23 points. You had Kyle Kuzma drop 16. Dame had 28. A big Dame game for him. Love to see him bounce back after a little bit of a down performance from him against the Wizards a bit there. You had Brooke Lopez come through with 17 points, and off the bench, you had Gary Trent Jr. and Kevin Porter Jr. both with double-digit scoring. And again, Kevin Porter Jr., that guy who helped really spark the run. When that fourth quarter opened and it's a lineup and you look on the court and you see there's no Dame, there's no Giannis, and you're like, okay, let's see how they're going to be able to survive these minutes is normally what my mind goes to. Can you survive the minutes without your two stars on the court? Where's the offense going to come from? How are you going to find a way to score? The fourth quarter starts off. You got Gary Trent Jr. coming through, hitting the three. Kevin Porter Jr. assisted on that bucket. Wiggins responded with a layup. And then after that point, it was 95-88. And Kevin Porter Jr. responded with a run of his own that led to 9 straight Bucks points. He had 7 points that he scored by himself straight. Then he had the Sims alley-oop, as you mentioned. And seeing him assist or score on the first 12 points of that fourth quarter, it got them in a really good position for when Giannis checked back in, for when Dame checked back in. And you saw those two guys fit in pretty seamlessly with everything else they had going on. You saw the defense go up. And I really want to highlight Kuz again for the defense that he played against here on the fourth quarter, because we've seen like Damian Lillard get bothered by having defenders that have more length on them, just defending them and just using that length to try to, throw him off his game. And I felt like Kuz did a really good job on Hero down the stretch in this game. So I've enjoyed seeing that, and it's exciting to come away with a comeback victory. It's something about it where you got your juices flowing. You're like, man, a win, an important one, like you said, but not impressive, because the question is like, How do the Bucks keep finding themselves in these positions where they need to have a big comeback? Like, what do the Bucks need to clean up? So I want to explore those areas that they need to kind of clean up to continue to get better on that march towards the championship right after this. DoorDash has something for you, NBA fans. So get ready because they swoosh and you save. So thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in the game, you score a huge deal the next day. When any player scores 50 or more in the game during the rest of this 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order up to $10 the next day from noon to midnight. You can take advantage of that deal whether you're staying up late the next day watching highlights from like, oh, I need another snack real quick. Use that Dash Pass. Get something delicious while you save. Next day, you see them, hey man, I kind of want some lunch. DoorDash it up. Use your Dash Pass. Get your favorite meal with no delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, you now save even more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off of an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after that 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. As we mentioned, Frank, another comeback for the Bucks in this one against the Heat. And watching this game early on, I just kept saying they are giving up too much dribble penetration over and over and over. It felt like a revolving door. They were touching the paint too easily. And you saw that early on, especially in the difference of points in the paint that the Heat were getting in regards to the Bucks that they were getting. On top
And
of that,
fouls
and
free
fouls. That's
throws.
the other piece
Yeah.
of it. The Bucks were fouling so much in this game. Fortunately, the Heat were also fouling a lot in this game. The whistles, man, they were working in this one. But we talked after the Clippers game, I believe it was. Yeah, because we were talking about how the Clippers tend to play a little bit more of an ISO heavy offense. They didn't have Norm Powell when we saw them out of the break. So it was even more ISO with Kawhi and Harden trying to lead the way there. And we were like, if that's the case, Taurean Prince makes some sense with this jumbo lineup that they're starting here. But we had some questions then, like, how does this look if they're playing against a smaller two guard, someone else who can just kind of create a little bit more chaos on the drive? And we had a little answer of that tonight, watching Tyler Hero and seeing the Bucks try to find ways to slow him down. Some questions around Taurean Prince's role as that starting two guard, but we can talk a bit more about the starting lineup after this. But in general, what areas did you see in this game that you would like to see the Bucks clean up going forward?
I mean, yeah, I think that, well, it's kind of hard to talk about the point of attack issues and not talk about the starting five.
Very true.
So
Rip the
Camille,
Band-Aid off.
we're just gonna get into it a little bit. Yeah, I just think they need somebody who's more of a point of attack guy. And, again, I obviously Andre Jackson Jr. had been that guy, right? I think he's the best guy the Bucks have in terms of just lateral quickness, shiftiness, kind of dodging screens. And obviously he's got, kind of the athleticism, although he's not really a defensive playmaker, right? He doesn't really get blocks and steals. He's really more of a positional guy. I think for the reasons that we've discussed a fair bit on this pod, I don't think the offense is just good enough. And I think teams can game plan too much for the Bucks when Andre's out there. So I think it made sense to go away from Andre in the starting five. I think Andre and Kuz, given Kuz's kind of unpredictability offensively, I think Kuz has generally been really good for the Bucks. But like the idea that you're gonna put the ball in Kuz's hands and expect him to like reliably and kind of make plays. I don't feel great about that. He is not a Chris Middleton replacement in that regard. Ironically, I mean, Kevin Porter Jr. has been the second unit, offensive fulcrum guy.
Which was important, especially with Bobby missing these games here.
Yeah, exactly. Now he plays like 14, 15 minutes a game. He only played 14 minutes tonight. I don't know how much you can scale up his minutes because he kind of needs the ball, right? He has shown he can be an off-ball shooter, like when he was with the Rockets, but like that's really not, the kind of ideal use of him. And I think obviously when he feels the ball and he has the ball and he can attack, that's kind of when he's at his best. So yeah, I mean, I think the point of attack stuff I think was an issue early. I think it is a little bit weird. It feels like every time you put in, especially AJ Green, I think the point of
Mhm.
attack stuff gets better. I think Kuz, when he's just kind of one-on-one and not having to get over screens, I think is generally been very good in terms of using that length. We've seen that repeatedly, especially in that Clippers game. I thought he was awesome.
Yeah.
Switching and defending against whether it was, Harden or Kawhi. So I think he's been really important in that regard. And, I think KPJ as well. Again, as like KPJ, like a really good defender, like yeah, I think he probably needs to be a little more consistent, but I think he uses his tools. We saw him get a couple steals tonight again.
Hmm.
He definitely uses his physicality, I think, well. He's not small, right? He's 6'3", 6'4", and I forget what he's listed at weight wise, but I think he's like 215 or something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
he's
not
tall.
he's not a small guy, and so I think it's going to be interesting to see how Doc kind of balances this, right? Like we saw Doc stick with him longer. I think he basically played until the 5-minute mark of the fourth quarter and then went back to AJ. And so I think if you're talking about like, well, who should the Bucks be starting? The obvious question, the first place to look is who are you closing with,
Yeah.
because that's clearly like, that's probably the best, and especially with this version of the Bucks with Ajax having started for so long but not finishing most games. I think you can tell like who does Doc Rivers believe are his best five, and it's generally been AJ Green closing most of these games for a while. So I think I would probably say like, all right, well if that's who you think is your best player, or sorry, your best fifth guy, then that kind of might be where I would kind of look. I think Gary Trent could just as easily kind of do that role. I think they both
Hmm.
need to play a fair bit, and kind of as we've been saying, it seems like on any given night one of them has a really good night. Tonight it was GT, 16 points, had another 4-point potential play that got waved off on a bit of a weird play. I
That
mean,
was weird. That he grabbed the arm of the
yeah,
defender. Like I was like, I don't know about that.
yeah. I mean, it's also weird because like the ball's like out of his hands, so it's kind of like I don't know. I always that's kind of an interesting thing. Like if a guy shoots it, the ball's out of his hands, and then like on a follow through, it's I don't know. I mean, obviously they ruled that it was wiped out the play. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, I think in terms of who do I trust to defend point of attack, right? That's kind of the fundamental question.
Hmm.
Um, I think between AJ, even KPJ, and GT, all the initials basically. I think those guys have been pretty good. Now again, like are you are you counting on them in game 7 against the Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell? Like okay, like I get you'd have some questions, but I think for now, um, I think I would roll with either AJ or GT in the starting five. I think that kind of rebalances things, and you've got TP as the backup three, which kind of makes sense if you're playing Kuz at the three to start. And then obviously you still have KPJ kind of as a lead ball handler who can come in and give Dame a rest. And I mean that's kind of been the remarkable thing, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're missing much, especially because
Hmm.
Dame's had a bit of a slow kind of return to form tonight. I think the numbers were better, 28 points, which obviously was important. But like against the Clippers, right, where he struggled most of that game, it was kind of like when KPJ went out, I was kind of like, is that like kind of like would have almost feel better rolling with KPJ, which is like kind
Crazy
of
to say when you think about.
crazy to say it. And fortunately, Dame reminded us why that would have been crazy because he then went off and, you know, finished that game out. But yeah, I don't know. So I think definitely. I mean, it was kind of. I felt like the defensive rebounding also felt like it had
Hmm.
issues. But then you look at the numbers, and they were totally fine tonight. It just felt like maybe like Bam had a couple putback dunks. So sometimes that's just like they just seemed louder. But overall, like they had 10 offensive rebounds. It didn't really hurt the Bucks a whole lot, and they were able to kind of, for the most part, keep it fairly clean on the offensive glass. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think I preempted the starting five question, but
It's all good.
I think that's kind of where we were headed anyway.
Absolutely were. And I'm in the similar boat for you. I know the whole idea of Torian Prince coming back to that starting lineup is that, he was playing better next to Giannis and Dame, so you want to try to maximize his minutes there, but it's a new
And I
look
think I
team.
think AJ's been bad in the starting five, but it's obviously has not happened very much, right? So it's
Right.
like you can
So
kind
like,
of play these like, oh well, like GT was bad to start this year at the starting two,
yep.
and Torian Prince has generally been good at the starters, but I don't know. Like I don't know how much stock to put into that when it doesn't feel like the fit makes sense.
Yeah, and I feel like the team is a bit different now as well.
Mhm.
So it's like you kind of have to just see what you have here. And again, I think against smaller offensive guys, like Torian Prince is going to be a little bit of a problem. He's a bit better suited to guard up than he is to guard down. So you want to try to keep him out of those situations. So something for the Bucks to continue to play around with, keep an eye on. I'll be really curious to see what this lineup in the rotation looks like once Bobby does come back. But we have a lot of time before we have to think about that
Yeah, sadly,
at the moment.
the
Right
season's
now,
gonna be basically over by the time Bobby's back. Yeah,
right, and then it's like you gotta figure this out really quickly, but right
yeah.
now, it's more so of just figuring out what do these new guys do? How do they fit in with what we have going on, and what can we count on them for? And I kind of enjoy small sample size theater because it can be so jarring where you're like, "Wait, what is happening?" And we are in a very small sample size right now for the Bucks after the All-Star break with not everyone has. We just mentioned Bobby's gone, but Giannis is back in the lineup. You got Dame out there. So there are some things I think are interesting that we've seen from the Bucks after All-Star break that we weren't seeing before. Again, very small sample size. So take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but are these early trends to keep an eye on? I want to run some of these numbers by Frank and by you all right after this. FanDuel is here for you when the game tips off and that NBA action is just getting started. There is no better place than to get in on that said action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you missed the opening tip-off, or if you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, if you've been watching the Bucks recently, them fourth quarter comebacks are right in line here. You can stay in the action. So if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets in the same game parlay. Like the live betting feature that FanDuel has can help keep you in every single moment of the game and keep those moments exciting. Because whether you're sitting there and you're watching your own team and you're looking for that late game comeback, or you're picking a player to hit a clutch three, there never feels like a moment where your chance is missed on making money off of those decisions. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. That's fanduel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Some numbers to consider for this Bucks team coming out of the All-Star break. Again, very small sample size. It's been 3 games out of the break. And the numbers I pulled, we're really looking at the first 2 games and kind of thinking of how this game against the Heat was playing out. And 2 little trends to come for this team out of the break. One, the offense has been a little bit worse than what we saw prior. Again, small sample size. A lot of different things contribute to that. Giannis minute restriction, Dame missing one of those games, so on and so forth. Before, and all numbers that I have here according to Cleaning the Glass. Before the break, they were the 10th in offensive rating, about 18th with the first 2 games. I think it's up to 14th now after this game against the Heat. And even that's with them even having a better free throw rate at this point than they had prior to the break. They had like the 20th free throw rate prior to the break. It's jumped up to the 6th after this game in the league. And I think a key part of the offense being clunky outside the minutes restriction and all of those things comes to they've just been turning the ball over more. They went from being a team that was 7th in turnover percentage to 28th, 21st after this particular game. And on the defensive side of things, they've been a little bit better defensively. They've gone from 15th to 10th in defensive rating, but they've been fouling more. And it's been so strange because they're fouling more, but they're also forcing more turnovers. Like they are 13th in turnover rate after being like 27th before the break. So when you're hearing some of these things, Frank, of like this team, the offense has been a little bit worse, but they're shooting more free throws, but they're turning the ball over more. On defense, they've been playing a little bit better, but they've been fouling more, but they've been forcing more turnovers. When you hear like these things that have been happening again in a very small sample size for this team, What do you think is sustainable or easy for this team to clean up going forward?
I mean, I think the offensive stuff in particular, like with Dame missing, one of the games post All-Star break, and Giannis obviously being on a reduced minutes load and kind of like not looking altogether himself. Even tonight, obviously, like, I mean, he didn't take a free
Mhm.
throw tonight, right? Even though the rest of the
Strange.
Bucks got to the free throw line a bunch, like Giannis got no free throws, which I don't, has that maybe happened like maybe one other time this year? I'd have
I
to
believe I heard them
check.
say the last time this happened was against the Heat, I think like last year.
Yeah. So, um, and obviously, I mean, he took some jumpers early, but obviously he was
Mhm.
he was still attacking, especially as the game wore on, and ended up making some big plays, both scoring as well as passing, right? Like great pass to Brook for a late bucket. Um, so I think offensively, I mean, my biggest concern having traded Chris was
Mhm.
where is going to be that like third kind of playmaking option coming from? And I mean, we've been asking all season, even when Chris was back, like, hey, Ryan Rollins has been really good, but like he's not like an offensive playmaker per se, right? He's kind of
Right.
a, you know, kind of sneaky, good at times, like can make some plays, has shot the ball solidly from three. But he's more of a like low mistake guy than a guy that's like really going out and putting pressure on the defense.
Mhm.
So I think that was, I mean, I think that's been a concern all year, right? Like that kind of playmaking back, kind of backup guard kind of role. And I think part of it too is just like it's so interesting with Dame, right? Because with Dame, you always feel like you need a defensive backup guard, ideally one that can play with him. And that's how you end up with Patrick Beverly last year. That's how you ended
Mhm.
up with DeLon Wright this year, was the feeling like, you need like kind of a bigger defensive backup guard who can, again, kind of back him up, but also play with him and take some of the pressure off him. And I think what's, interesting now is, with Porter, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, like, he's obviously making a huge case to play more.
Yeah.
And, like how many more minutes you can get him, like I don't know, because again, you look at like the rotations right now. I mean, like
Mhm.
tonight, AJ played 30 minutes. And I think that, obviously he wasn't shooting the ball very well, but like I think that speaks to just like how much they trust him defensively. But
Mhm.
I think that's really probably, something that if KPJ can show that like he can defend close to what AJ has done defensively, and I don't know that he can, but like I think he can probably make more plays. He's obviously more athletic than AJ is, but like I thought like AJ tonight, like Wiggins, they tried to post up Wiggins on him, repeatedly in the
Mhm.
fourth quarter, and I thought he mostly held his ground pretty well. And that kind of just again speaks to sort of like what he's done. Like I mean, he's not listed above 200, but like he's got an upper body. I mean, like AJ is not a guy who's you can just like put under the rim.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to just kind of like see like kind of how some of these rotations shake out. It is weird like when AJ and Gary come in together because they're so similar and stylistically, on both ends really. I think Gary's more of a risk taker defensively than AJ is, but in terms of
And
like
probably
size,
somebody, yeah, and probably
yeah,
somebody who
exactly.
just goes to create his own shot a little bit more than what AJ does at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. So I think offensively, hopefully they kind of work out some of these kinks. I think getting a movement shooter though, and I think especially offensively, I think probably maybe would add a little more dynamism to the starting five, which I think again it feels like it's just been very like standing around. Because again, like Torian can, yeah, he sometimes will take a dribble handoff, but like he's mostly just kind of standing in the corner.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean Kuz can like back cut at times, and you can attack off a handoff and occasionally run a pick and roll, but like doesn't really like reliably pressure the defense. So much comes down to Dame and Giannis with that starting group right now. And I think having a guy like AJ or GT who, can just get to a three-pointer that they can make, pretty reliably, and just move around, and I think just kind of just make the defense play a little differently. And then I think defensive, obviously, probably the more important thing is they can just
Mhm.
defend down in ways that, as you pointed out, like TP's just, I mean, he's too big, right? He's
Yeah.
6'6", to whatever, 220, something like that. So that would kind of be the main thing I'd looking for. I mean, defensively, they really kind of let go of the rope before the All-Star break.
And that's what helped tank that number a little bit for
The
him.
West Coast road trip obviously was really bad without Bobby. They didn't feel like they didn't have a way to kind of, um, you know, make up for Bobby's absence from a size perspective. And obviously that's what I think Sims has been important for. And, like with Sims, it's kind of funny. It's like he doesn't really do much in the box score. Like he's mostly just kind of run around trying to set screens, set dribble handoffs. He's gotten a few offensive rebounds here and there, but like hasn't really he hasn't really. It feels like for a guy as athletic as him who doesn't really have any other obligations, like it would be nice if he could be kind of translate his activity into offensive rebounds at a bit higher rate. But it feels like every time you look at the box score, I don't know what the numbers say on him so far, but it feels like every time you look at the box score, he's a positive. And like that's kind of all you
You need in those minutes.
that's all you kind of want from all your guys, right? It's like, hey, if you just everybody's positive, then you're gonna win a lot of games. But I think for a guy like him who like doesn't obviously sort of impact the game in kind of clear statistical ways, I think, just the fact that he is, I think it's interesting because like a lot of times with these like just bouncy athletic kind of low skill players, they often defensively don't have like the IQ, and they they try to block everything, or like they commit bad fouls. And I think so far like he's been pretty good about like, I mean he doesn't, I don't know, I mean maybe we just haven't seen it yet, but I think he's generally like been pretty fit in pretty well. It doesn't seem like he makes like a lot of mistakes, and that's obviously really important because if he's not going to kind of make a lot of plays, then he at least has to make a few mistakes and just be strong. And hopefully they'll figure some stuff out in terms of like, you saw Porter throw him the alley-oop. Giannis tried to get him an alley-oop.
We need more guys to be able to throw oops on this team, Frank.
Yeah, exactly. I think they need to figure out kind of how to unlock some of that with him. But I mean, it's important, like just, and I think I'm glad that, and again, not that I was like pounding the Jericho Sims drum before, because I kind of have, measured expectations for him, but I give credit to Doc. I mean, I think he realized like, we need some size. That had really kind of hurt them previously. So we'll see. But I mean, they got to survive for a while without Bobby. And so it is interesting that, Sims has been the guy that has gotten kind of a good chunk of minutes. And we really have not seen a lot of like real, like protracted, like small ball Giannis 5 type stuff.
They leaned into that side.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if Giannis at the 5, I don't know. Like, I feel like if Sims is out there, then he's playing the 5. So I don't think we can count Sims Giannis minutes as like true like small ball units. But I do think it is a different look because you can switch obviously either of those guys. And I think the interesting thing is going to be, especially if they run those guys together when Dame is off the floor, then you can really switch everything at that point. Because I mean, KPJ I think can hold up on a switch better certainly than Dame can. AJ I think can hold up against a switch. That's where TP I think is useful because he is a switchable guy, and Kuzma of course. So I think we'll see. I mean, maybe it's kind of a bit of a different version of kind of the switch everything lineup, and it won't be Giannis with Kuz and TP. Maybe it is with Sims some of these minutes, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, again, if you can kind of just keep working out these kinks while you're winning, like I feel like we've sort of been saying that all year long, Camille. It would be nice if they could, they've had like one streak of like 5 or 6 games where I felt like they really were dominating consistently. They're not doing that right now. So we'll see. But with kind of some of the games coming up this week, hey, just if you keep winning, I think we'd all be happy with that because the harder the competition, the kind of less, demanding I'm going to be in terms of like scoring margin and stuff like that. Just keep winning games because honestly, at this point, it's like just get to the playoffs healthy and in the 4 or 5 bracket. That's kind of all I'm really hoping for at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see how they continue to look against different levels of competition. Like they're in Houston next. So that's going to be a game. We know Houston's a great defensive team. To see how they're able to score against that team and how they look defensively as well, knowing Houston likes to get out there and run, force turnovers, see how they handle that. And then they have the Nuggets at home on Thursday. So some comp is coming the Bucks way, and we will be here on Locked On Bucks breaking that all down. So make sure you keep it locked in to Locked On Bucks. For Frank and myself, we'll catch you later.